What kind of person hijacks your home for their dream wedding without asking? I learned the answer the hard way when HOA Karen, my neighbor and self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, HOA, decided my ranch patio was her perfect venue. My name is Ellie, and I've lived on this sprawling Montana property for a decade, pouring my heart into every inch of its weathered wood and wildflower-dotted fields. The patio, with its hand-built pergola and view of the mountains, was my sanctuary, a place where I'd sip coffee at dawn and host quiet barbecues under the stars. But to Karen, it was just a stage for her over-the-top nuptials, and she wasn't about to let a little thing like my permission stop her. It started with a knock on my door one crisp October morning. Karen, all 300 pounds of her, stood there in a glittering tracksuit, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Ellie, darling, I'm getting married next month, and your patio is just divine. We'll need it for the ceremony. You don't mind, do you? Her smile was a challenge, daring me to say no. I blinked, stunned. Karen, that's my home. You can't just, she cut me off, waving a manicured hand. Oh, don't be selfish. It's for love. The HOA board already approved it. I didn't know it then, but that was the first lie in a web she'd been spinning for weeks. The audacity hit me like a slap. I dealt with Karen's HOA tyranny before, fines for my wildflower garden being too untidy, complaints about my old pickup truck, but this was a new low. My patio wasn't just a patch of land. It was where I'd scattered my late husband's ashes, where I'd rebuilt my life after his passing. I told her no, firmly, and shut the door. But Karen wasn't the type to take no for an answer. Over the next few days, I noticed strange cars pulling up to my property line, people with clipboards measuring my patio, and even a delivery truck dropping off floral arches. When I confronted her, she smirked and said, "It's happening. Ellie, be a good neighbor." I checked with the HOA board, only to discover Karen had lied. They hadn't approved anything. She'd forged documents, bullied neighbors into silence, and was banking on my compliance to pull off her stunt. The realization burned in my chest. She thought she could steamroll me. I could have called the police, but this was personal. Karen had crossed a line, and I wasn't about to let her waltz through my life like she owned it. I started digging. A friend at the county clerk's office pulled records showing Karen's wedding planner had bribed a local official to expedite permits for an event on my land. Another neighbor, too scared to confront Karen directly, slipped me texts showing she'd threatened to fine anyone who spoke out. The deeper I went, the dirtier it got. Karen wasn't just a bully. She was a schemer, using her HOA power to manipulate and intimidate. But I wasn't helpless. I had a plan. And it wasn't just about stopping her, it was about turning her moment of triumph into one she'd never forget. The twist came when I found an old journal in my attic, tucked away with my husband's things. It wasn't just a diary. It was a record of every HOA meeting he'd attended, including one where Karen had tried to claim a neighbor's barn for a community event years ago. My husband had stopped her then, documenting her tactics and rallying the neighborhood to vote her down. Reading his words, I felt him beside me, his quiet strength urging me on. It was a gut punch, but it lit a fire in me. This wasn't just my fight, it was a continuation of his. Karen had picked the wrong widow to mess with. Armed with this, I called a secret meeting with a few trusted neighbors. We pored over the journal, cross-referencing Karen's past schemes with her current ones. Patterns emerged: lies, forged signatures, veiled threats. We had her playbook, and we were ready to rewrite the ending. The wedding day arrived, and my ranch was unrecognizable. Karen's crew had transformed my patio into a gaudy wonderland of tulle and fairy lights, with a massive floral arch blocking my mountain view. Guests in pastel suits and dresses milled about, sipping champagne, while Karen, in a blinding white gown, barked orders at her planner. I watched from my kitchen window, my heart pounding. The ceremony was set to start at sunset, and I had one shot to make this right. I'd spent the week preparing, coordinating with neighbors, and pulling strings of my own. Karen thought she'd won, but she didn't know I'd been talking to her caterer, her florist, even her officiant. They were locals, and they didn't take kindly to being bullied either. As the music swelled and Karen started her march down the aisle, I stepped out my back door, a megaphone in hand, and flipped the script. "Ladies and gentlemen," I called, my voice cutting through the violin strains. The crowd froze, heads turning. Karen's face twisted, her bouquet trembling in her grip. "This wedding is on my property, without my consent. Karen lied to you, to the HOA, and to the county. She forged permits and threatened neighbors to pull this off." Gasps rippled through the guests. Karen stormed toward me, her heels sinking into the grass. "You're ruining my day," she shrieked, but I held my ground. I raised the megaphone again, reading from the journal, exposing her past schemes and the forged documents I'd uncovered. The officiant, already briefed, stepped forward and refused to proceed. The caterer, a burly man named Tom, crossed his arms and announced he was pulling his service. The florist started dismantling the arch, muttering about unpaid invoices. Karen's empire was crumbling, and the look on her face, shock morphing into rage, was almost worth the months of stress. But Karen didn't go down quietly. She lunged at me, screaming that I was jealous, that I was a nobody trying to ruin her happiness. The crowd parted, some filming on their phones, others whispering. I didn't flinch. "This patio is my home," I said, my voice steady. "It's where I mourn my husband, where I rebuilt my life. You don't get to take that from me." For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then a neighbor, old Mrs. Callahan, stepped forward. "She's right," she said, her voice quavering but firm. "Karen's been bullying us for years." Others joined in, voices rising, recounting their own stories of her threats and fines. The tide had turned. Karen's groom, a quiet man who'd been silent all day, finally spoke. "Karen, is this true?" Her stammering denial was drowned out by the crowd's murmurs. He walked away, leaving her standing alone under her half-dismantled arch. The fallout was swift. By nightfall, the patio was cleared, the fairy lights gone, the tulle in heaps. Karen's wedding was canceled, her reputation in tatters. The HOA board, spurred by the public humiliation, voted her out that week. The journal became a neighborhood legend, passed around like a sacred text, ensuring Karen's tactics would never work again. I stood on my patio the next morning, coffee in hand, the mountains clear and sharp against the sky. It wasn't just about winning, it was about reclaiming what was mine, honoring the life I'd built, and the man who'd loved this place as much as I did. Looking back, I realized this wasn't just about a patio. It was about standing up to someone who thought they could take what wasn't theirs, who believed power came from intimidation. I'd been quiet too long, letting Karen's petty fines and glares chip away at me. But that day, I found my voice, and so did my neighbors. We weren't just a scattered group of houses anymore. We were a community, bound by the courage to say no. Karen moved away a month later. Her house sold to a young couple who planted wildflowers and waved when they saw me. The patio is mine again. But it's more than that. No, it's a reminder that no one can take your home, your heart, or your fight unless you let them. And I'll never let them again.